call the meeting of the Facilities and Finance to order. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
I move we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right then, before we get started, I want to explain that normally our committee meetings are not live streamed, but because of the importance of our topic today and with so much at stake, we thought it would serve the public better to have this live streamed. Of course, always our committee meetings are open to the public. They're published with plenty of notice to attend. So I'd like to give an update, if you will, on where we are with city council support. They are recommending decreasing the current year's funding by $1,434,568. And I'd like to remind everybody that the state budget, what we expect to get from the state, hasn't been figured out, nor have we really had confirmation that the calculation error that was found in the funding spreadsheet has been satisfactorily resolved to hold schools harmless as promised. Now, how these meetings generally proceed is this is the committee, and so it's only the committee. You'll notice only 3 of our members here and myself voted on the motions. Other school board members are here, but they are here as spectators and for their own informational purposes. We don't have public comment at committee meetings, which is why we're not offering it today. For today, we'll have a 3-part meeting. First, we're going to review our options for reducing the budget. Now, the committee will not vote on any of these measures. We're just reviewing and vetting them, and we will take them to the full board at our next meeting for discussion and vote. Secondly, we want to address some of the questions that we have received as council has talked over our budget and as we have talked over our budget, and also with some of the things that we are going to propose. And then finally, we'll talk about what our next steps are, where we go from here. All right? Okay? So, you want me to do the part 1?
Yep.
Okay. First, as a committee and on behalf of LCS, Dr. Edwards and her staff, we want to acknowledge the hard work done by our city manager, city staff, and some members of city council. In an effort to meet the needs of the city and move towards providing LCS employees with a competitive wage, the city manager first proposed lowering the tax rate from 111 to 105 to provide tax relief for our citizens, which also included an additional $3 million over level funding to provide LCS employees with competitive wages. We were prepared to work with the city manager and council in a collaborative way. However, that proposal was not supported by some on city council. Later, the city manager proposed lowering the tax rate to 99 cents or even as low as 93 cents, and each of these proposals provided an additional $2.1 million, which is the local match for compensation supplement provided in the December 2022 governor's budget. Again, we were prepared to work with the manager and team to make this work. Lastly, even with the proposal to lower the tax rate to 89 cents, the city manager proposed keeping LCS at level funding. Yet despite these proposals from the city manager, some members of city council have requested not to provide LCS with any additional funding, and in fact, to reduce the funding by 1.4 million. Unfortunately, we are here to discuss a reduction in our operating budget that provides no additional supplement for increased wages. The reduction in funding would provide LCS funding that is just slightly higher than the funding that was received 9 years ago in 2015, just for context. So, all that said, the school board still continues and has from the very start prioritized competitive wages, not only for our teachers, but all of our staff, hourly and salaried. We've asked the administration to provide for consideration some budget reductions and cuts to balance the budget while still presenting a plan for competitive wages. And the Finance Committee, during this meeting today, may suggest additional areas to explore for reduction and cuts. All righty?
Okay, all right. And since we are also live streaming, we may have some folks who are visiting with us for the first time who may not understand our budget process. So I want to provide a little context for that. I also just want to make sure that I'm providing factual information for individuals and letting them know where they can find this information. So we produced a budget calendar, which for us actually starts in the summer with the work that we begin doing as administrators, working together with our schools and then coming together with our finance committee in October and around November, getting good traction on that. As Dr. Sinha said, we are funded in part by 3 different areas. A small area is our federal and miscellaneous funding, but the 2 big areas are our city local funding and also state funding. So I'm gonna start with state funding and try to talk through how did we develop our budget? How did we get to 1550? And what does that mean? So I will be passing out some documents here for the Finance Committee, but I will also, for those viewing, make sure that the clerk has these to upload to this agenda for board docs. So what you have in front of you that's coming around, and I've labeled them just so I stay on point, is letter A. And letter A, you will see, is the calc tool. This is available on the VDOE website. This is the original governor's budget from December 16th, 2022. This is what we used when we started to develop our budget, and we estimated what funds we would receive in what categories from the state. It is the budget that we continue to use in January, in February, and in March when the school board voted on March 21st on the proposed budget. It wasn't until later, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well, that the General Assembly had another budget. That's pretty unusual for us. Generally, somewhere around February, the state budget is wrapped up, and we are pretty solid on what we know we're going to get from the state. So any talk right now about what we are receiving from the state is not solidified, not finalized, and we have not received exactly an amount. The state has not approved their budget. But for building a budget purposes, this is the document that we used. Again, this is the December 16th, 2020 document, and you can see for FY17, there is a state allocation of about a little over $70 million with $1.8 million for infrastructure and operations. And again, to anybody in the public, this can be found on the VDOE website for their calc tool. So we began to build a budget, and many of you will recognize this document, which I have labeled B, because it has been featured in many of our school board meetings, but I'm going to pass it around again. And this one-pager represents our budget, operating budget discussion. And again, this operating budget discussion is built on the governor's budget, which really shows an increase of $4.3 million from that December 16th budget. And from that, one of the things that we heard this school board say is their priorities are our staff and having high-quality staff so that we can provide excellent services and programs for our teachers. So we brought forth a budget that was very much in line to getting us to be more competitive with our neighbors. I believe I had showed a budget presentation where I showed where Lynchburg City Schools fared around the neighboring divisions, as well as some of the city divisions, and we were not at the top. And we know that we want to be more competitive. We want to retain our staff, our quality staff. We also want to recruit people here. So we developed a budget that we thought we could recruit and retain both teachers, bus drivers, instructional assistants, and a little bit for everyone. And we called that the 1550 plan. So $15 an hour was what we proposed to raise our classified wages from $13.11. It should be noted the last time I checked the MIT website, living wage for Lynchburg City was about $16.14. It may have gone up since then, but we're approaching that 15 is going up. And then $50,000 for our teaching staff, certificated staff, which would make us very competitive with our neighboring districts. This is inclusive of the 5% raise that the governor had proposed over the 2-year period. So we are in that second period. So what you have before you is our one-page friendly document. And we had some wonderful conversations about scenarios A, B, C, and D. We talked about the grocery tax, which was the error that the VDOE had made, and the potential impact for us. We also talked about health insurance, and where the school board wanted to move in terms of health insurance. And on March 21st, after a very thoughtful and engaging discussion with all of you all, we adopted what would be scenario D on our one-page sheet, which in essence, we needed about $11.7 million to put forth the 1550 plan and a few other things on this page. We figured out with compensation supplement, the increase in basic aid from the state, some other additional funds, and some internal reductions that we were already making, that we could chop that 11.7 down to 6.5. And it was at that point where we're like, we need to reach out to our local city council. Excuse me. 6.5 would help us move in that direction. So that is what document B illustrates. And then, again, just because folks are making sure that I am fact-checking, document C is the minutes from the board agenda on March 21st, where the school board actually voted. And if you guys remember that night, we had a couple different iterations of this, looking at this, where the board wanted to take away everything except 1550. There was a commitment that 1550 was so important that that was the only thing that we wanted. And we went back and forth, but ultimately, per this document, the board voted in support of the budget as presented, which is scenario D on this sheet. So that got us to March 21st. And by code, we have to adopt a budget by then. So what has happened with our relationship with the city? Well, the city also is simultaneously doing their budget, and they needed information from us to kind of put together their budget. So somewhere in February, before the board deliberated, before the board had an opportunity to vet any options, we had to send the city a proposed number. So we did. We sent them the option or scenario B number, which included the additional $700,000 for health insurance. And then this board got back to work and worked and talked about different health insurance options. And then we reduced our request for the city. We recognized that they needed a number in February, that they had to print a number that is probably still printed in their documents, but we have since sent over the actual number, which is $700,000 less due to the work that this board did in March and what you voted on March 21st. And that was also before we had the joint city-school meeting, which we had on March 28th. Then there's a lot that has happened. The General Assembly had not solidified a state budget, so they got back to work. So what I am handing out to you is letter D, which is the General Assembly budget, even though there was a Senate proposal and a House proposal in between there. And on April 7th, as a stopgap measure, the General Assembly put together this budget, which can also be found on the VDOE website as a part of the calc tool to the public. But this budget, which was approved on as of April 7th, which is after this board voted, it's after the joint meeting that we have, you will notice that with this budget, which is also not finalized, whereas previously the governor's budget was at 70 million, if you go to page 3, you will now see that the skinny budget, as some refer to it, is at 68.9 million. So the most recent VDOE calc tool budget that is available to us is at 68.9 from the state, and it too is not finalized. So this is not a guarantee that we are going to receive these funds either, but I wanted the public to know exactly how and what information do we use as we build the budget and what comes from the state in. Okay. Let's talk about the city side of our budget. As I told you, we are funded from 3 different entities, a very small from federal and miscellaneous, as well as city and state. So this document E, which I am going to pass around. All right. This document I took from the city's website from their adopted 2023 budget. And it is at page 217 in the adopted budget. And I've highlighted just for the Finance Committee and anybody, when you look at this on board docs, that our current adopted FY23, where we are right now, local operating funds or support we receive from the city is currently $40,794,923. So when we refer to flat funding, level funding, current funding, and as Dr. Sinha talked about what the city manager proposed when he says this includes level funding, the reference is to this $40,794,923. That is our current support from the city. The reason why we are here tonight to have a little discussion is really about document F. And I apologize for taking you step by step, but I really want to kind of go through all of the information in a systematic way that folks who are watching can also follow. Document F, which is also available on the city website, it is part of the agenda package for their 7:30 meeting tonight. It is a resolution that shows what is on the agenda tonight as the FY24 local operating proposal of $39,360,355. And I have been asked by numerous people that says the amount of funding from the city, has it increased or decreased from last year to this year? And I actually choose not to answer that question and let the documents answer that question. If you look at the adopted budget from 2023, you'll see that we're at 40 million. If you look at what is proposed, again, not finalized, but what is proposed that is on tonight's agenda, it's $39.3 million on tonight's agenda. Also, new to us in the funding world is on the same agenda, the city has allocated school expenditures by major classification. So their recommendation for support from the city is $39,360,355. And by category funding, they have allocated the entire $109 million, which includes the governor's budget, which is not finalized. So the governor's revenue, the federal revenue, and the miscellaneous revenue. The city has allocated that into categories such as instruction, administration, transportation, operation, maintenance, food services, facilities, debt and fund transfers is 0. We don't use that one. Technology and a contingency reserve. So what I have in front of me is the document that will be on the 7:30 meeting tonight that showcases the support that is on the agenda for city support, as well as how not only should the city funds, but how the city, the state, the federal, and the miscellaneous funds should all be allocated to Lynchburg City Schools. So that in part has brought us here tonight, and just numerically so we can see. Hold on a second, did I get your G? Here we go. The next one, that was F, right? Keep it in line, that's why I labeled them. All right, so G, just because wild cards happen, and we'll spend much more time going through all of these, but G represents the General Assembly budget as of 4/7/2023, which again is not finalized. So it's just information that we have. And how that compares to the governor's budget, which we built. So what you will see after these documents, which again, this information is available on the VDOE website. You'll see the proposed, this is after 4/7, for each one of those categories, sales tax, basic aid, gifted and talented. You'll see what the actual budget is in the current year, and then you'll see the difference and this is just with the most recent proposal. What's most important is at the bottom, and added in red is the reduction that Dr. Sinha mentioned. So the city support, in their document for tonight, there is a reduction of $1.4 million, a little bit over that, which you note at the bottom of the page. So what does that look like as we look and compare the General Assembly budget from April and the budget from December, which we built our budget on, and you can see the difference. The governor's budget, which has not been finalized, provides us about $4.278 million in order to use towards our 1550 plan. The General Assembly budget reduces that to $955,000, and again, not finalized, but information that we have to use as we build our budgets. And according to council, or at least some, that say that the reduction of 1.4 million would leave, if you use the governor's budget, and you take that 4.3 million, that would leave a governor's budget still with 4.3 million, but us with 1.4 million less from the city, netting out 2.9 million. But if you look at if we get the skinny budget or the General Assembly budget, which again is not finalized, the reduction from City Council also leads to an overall reduction in our total budget of about $479,000 total. And I just put that here because neither the governor's budget, which we built our budget on, nor the General Assembly budget from April is finalized, and all of us at this table sit and await that final funding until we can make some decisions. So now that set the stage for, clearly, here it is in May, and I appreciate that all of you in March voted for a budget, and we've had joint meetings, and we've gone to work sessions to do the work, and I certainly appreciate the support that you have for Lynchburg City Schools. But we are at a point where we see a deficit in what we requested and what is possibly being proposed, although not finalized. So that brings me to the final document that I want to share with you all. Just somewhere in my pile of stuff. Here we go. And I will spend most of my time on this document. So this is H. And I will ask if my counterparts also, Dr. Wodica, Mrs. Pugh, or Ms. Capazzi, if they want to jump in as I'm going along to make sure that I don't miss anything. So this is our conceptual dilemma. How do we possibly reconcile the deficit that we're facing? So at the top left, you will see our current funding is $40,794,923. That's where we sit right now. The current tax rate was $1.11. If you look to the right in the red bucket, you will see that we requested $47.2 million in support of the 1550 plan. And the city support on tonight's agenda is $39.3 million. So that is our request of the city, 47.2, what we submitted. And then 39.3 is the, what's on the agenda tonight. That leaves us with a deficit of about 7.9 million from where we started. And keep in mind that we did originally, this board, you originally were a little higher at 47.9, and then you did some more work on health insurance and reduced your request to 47.2. So we are looking at a deficit based on tonight's city council agenda of $7.9 million that we must try to reconcile. And again, right underneath the red box, just for history, again, I would like to acknowledge that I appreciate, as a resident, I appreciate the lowering of the tax rate as well from what the city manager tried to do from $1.11 to $1.05. I also appreciate that he did so while also saying, I'm going to put in for $43.8 million for Lynchburg City Schools, getting you towards your goal. And I have historically written what was shared, and again, you can find this on the city website, when it was $1.05, what was included for LCS from the city, and I'm just talking about the city. When it was 99, that there was level funding plus an additional 2.1, which is the local match. When it was 93 cents, the city manager still recommended level funding plus an additional 2.1. And even at 89 cents, recommending level funding. But we are not sitting here looking at level funding. We're looking at less and a $7.9 million deficit or gap. So you have charged us with what can we look at? And I will go on record to say none of this is favorable. We strongly believed in 1550, but we recognize the financial responsibility to put some things on the table for the school board to look at. We took a systematic approach. So there is a pyramid approach. Whenever we are in a position where we may have to make cuts or reductions, we try to keep them as far away from children and classrooms as possible. So you will see at the top of the pyramid is the school board. And we start with what kinds of cuts and reductions can we make in the school board, in the school board's budget, in the school board programs and services. And then we move down to central office. And then we move to our overall plan, which was our 1550 plan. Then we move to community contributions. Then we move to district vacancies, school vacancies. Now we're starting to get closer to kids, programs and services. And then finally, again, none of this is palatable, but school closures are also in our pyramid thinking. So what you have before you, school board, is a $7.9 million gap. And what we've tried to do is categorize some things, the cost of those things, for the purpose of discussion, not decision-making. Christina already said that we're just really talking tonight about decision. So from the school board, and for those listening, one of the things that we put on here were school board stipends. And if we take the entirety of budgeted stipends, we're looking at about $23,600 in total budgeted stipends. Another thing are meals, school board meals at the end of a very long night at a board meeting. And then one of the things that we do across the board is look at professional development, but specifically professional development that requires overnight travel, hotel, planes. Where can we save in some money in those areas? So that is the first thing that we systematically put on the table. And then we move down to central office staff, and I'll let Dr. Wodeka share with you the first bullet of that, what he shared with me.
Sure, absolutely. So when we were meeting about this, Mrs. Pugh and Dr. Edwards and I had a discussion about our pay and where that is. And we know that there's a lot of conversation about admin pay and that sorts of things. So we sort of voluntarily said, let's just freeze our pay this year as we go forward. It was not, I just want the board to know and members of the public to know that, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Mrs. Pugh, but that's not something the superintendent asked us to do or demanded that we do. That's something that we did voluntarily and something that we felt very strongly was important to sort of set the tone about where we are. But that's sort of the first.
And you can see from the pay tables where, remember, our pay tables were also differentiated where the teachers and our classified staff who made under $15 an hour were getting percentages that were much higher. Some were 8, 10, and 12, whereas our admin staff were more like 3, 2, and 1.65% increase as well. We also, recognizing that when we talk about vacancies and looking at positions, we looked at this building and in terms of the division, if there were some positions that we can cut. Some may be vacant, some may require a reassignment or a difference or a pure cut. So you will see that the central office contribution is about $1.146 million. Then we took a look at our bread and butter, which was our 1550 plan, and I still want to go on record to say that I strongly believe that staff deserve 1550, and not as a final destination, but as a step along the way. However, we looked at what would happen if we modified that plan instead of 1550, where the teacher's salary would be $50,000. What if it were 1547? If it were $47,000. Currently, they're at a little over $43,000. That would save us about $3 million. And then we looked at, well, what if we still kept 15 for our lower workers, but moved to do the 5% that the governor had in the 2-year 5% increase? We did 5 last year. What if we did 5 this year for the teaching staff? That would save $4.364 million. And then we went all the way down to say, well, what if we just abandon, not a fan of that, the 1550 plan and just went for an average of 5% across the board, which is pretty much what we've done, like way in the past. We would take that and average it out for 5%. And that would save us, away from the 1550 plan, about $6.9 million if we did that. Now, each time we adjust our plan, remember what our goal was? We wanted to be more competitive. We wanted to be at least in the realm of closing the gap between us and our neighboring divisions. And each iteration, 1547, 5%, and 5%, knocks us back down to being one of the lower paid divisions in this area. So while it is a savings, it also contradicts one of the goals that we were trying to do. And then we just continue to look at hard things that none of us really feel like this is where we want to go, but we recognize the financial responsibility. So we started looking at places where we contribute, not necessarily to our students in a direct fashion. So you have some community contributions. Thank you all. It has been staff appreciation, and many of you have come and helped us hand out subs to our staff and just greet them and acknowledge them and support them and appreciate them. But there's a cost for that. It's about $15,000 by the time we do the luncheon and the plaques and the awards and everything. So that's on there. We have tremendous community partners that I am so proud to work with. but we also contribute to those community partners. So the Ed Foundation has done wonderful things for our staff, our students, in providing them, but we have a $10,000 contribution to them. Steps with Links is another program that we have. Partners in Education, VCIC, we typically buy tables for our staff to attend. This year, one of our own EC class teachers is being honored by VCIC, the Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance, or others. So we also went to see where's funds that were given there. Then we started looking at our bus drivers and how many unfilled positions we have. We have more than 6, but if we took 6, we could save about $222,000. I left school vacancies blank. Again, not a fan of collapsing the math teaching position or an English teaching position or a social studies teaching position if we had a staff member who retired or maybe who is no longer with us. I'll come back to that. Then we have some other additional hard things to look at. And one of them being the Sheffield Transition Program, which is currently in what we call learning cottages or portable units that we rent. So those are outside of the building. We could move the program and relocate it into a building and save $95,000 a year on renting that space. The Empowerment Academy, again, we've done such wonderful things with our students there. We could relocate that program and bring it into a school and possibly have a savings there. And then just because folks asked about what are the other things that you do that are special, we do contribute to the tuition for our students to attend the Gov School, the STEM Academy, dual enrollment, early college, and the CTE Academy, all of which are uniquely tied also to developing our young people so that they can go out into the business world and really be success. But these are things that we provide as LCS. And lastly on our list is we are in the middle of a facility study that involved 2 consultants, earlier Dominion 7, also MGT, and Dr. Wodeka, if you could just update us of where we are right now, and then I'll tell you about this next one.
Absolutely. So we engaged, we conducted community engagement last week with our community in person. We also continue to do that in a virtual sense to hear from them about the future of what our school portfolio should look like and what we do in our schools. And I think one of the central themes that we've talked about throughout this entire process is that we want to be intentional, thoughtful, and methodical in the way that we make decisions about, again, that future portfolio of those schools. And we've said from the very beginning that may result in some consolidation of schools and those sorts of things. But we feel very strongly that we've made a commitment to the community that will be done in a collaborative, thoughtful, community-driven, and honest way. And we are concerned, certainly, if there is a need to close a school, that not be done in a way that's sort of knee-jerk. And again, we had this conversation with City Council at your joint meeting about the importance of making sure we're doing this work in a methodical way, and we're just concerned about that. But it is a significant amount of money savings, and we do have a long way to go in this budget.
Yes. So we did put it on there, and just so that folks would understand, if we were to have to go down that road, we would definitely rezone the students who will also still need materials, supplies, lunch. So there's still a cost for the babies that we would have to rezone. And then possibly taking the existing staff from a school and filling school vacancies wherever they are, so that we don't lose our qualified people. We may just relocate them. So for that reason, that's on there, I left school vacancies as a question mark because we actually may need those vacancies if we choose that as an option.
So that refers to vacant teaching positions, for instance? Okay. I'm just
So if there's a second grade position that is open and available, and rather than interview and hire for a new teacher to come in, we would be taking an existing
Close that
teacher.
position,
And of course, we would try to do that with as much care and concern and love as possible and try to place people where they felt they could be successful and contribute and continue, because these are very hard decisions when you get down to where we are. But again, I want to go back to where I started. Notice how I prioritize them with stuff up top, school closures down on the very, very bottom as an option. So we wanted to do due diligence and bring the finance committee, and obviously this information will also go to the full school board, just a list of options for just discussion and talking about. We also met with our building staff here, as well as the directors and principals, and we left it open if there are things that we missed. Maybe there's something else that, hey, have you thought about? So we want our folks internally to work with us as we try to do this hard work, and we also want to hear from school board members as well. So I've done a lot of talking to frame it. I'm going to stop talking and turn it back over to you, Dr. Sun.
Question?
I need a clarification. In terms of Division 1550 plan you have here, it says modify 1550 plan to be 1547. So the dollar amount here is the least amount. So you're not including that 5% SOQ increase?
That would still get us above the 5%. So, because remember, our 1550, the raises were in the 10s and 12s for some of our folks. So if we reduced it to 47, that's still more than 5%.
So that 5% SOQ required increase will be part
It's
of it.
included in that. and
So then
goes
what is
above
the-
that.
Second line 5% increase.
Okay, so if you didn't do 47,000 as a base, if you just took our current 43,000 and you did 5% of that, that's about $2,000 add-on to a teacher. So it doesn't get them up to 47,000, but it does give them a 5% increase.
So 5% on top of the SOQ 5%.
No, 5%, which is the SOQ 5%. So that would get teachers somewhere over like 45. Our starting salary is 43.
Gets us to 45.6?
Yeah.
Which
So that
then-
would give teachers the mandatory, if we were to take the compensation supplement, that would give them that 5% raise for the second year. It's not an additional.
Because the third line says abandon 1550 plan for an average 5% increase.
Correct, because if you look at the second line, the 15 still stays the same. So any staff member who's at $13.11 who gets 15, that's way more than a 5% increase. That last line just says, we're just gonna do 5%, an average of 5% for everyone. So our folks making $13.11 will get 5% of that.
Because the reason it doesn't make sense, the dollar amount keeps increasing, but looks like the benefits are decreasing in terms of what take-home salary for people will be.
When you say the dollar amount, that's
Like-
the amount that is saved from the original plan.
Or the amount saved, not the amount expended.
Oh, yeah, that's, if you were like, I'm trying to cut $7.8 million, you may say, look, I can get 6.9 if I choose that last option. Or, I don't want to do that, I'll go with 1547, that'll save $3 million from our deficit. We're looking at deficit savings.
Go ahead.
Question on the same thing. Those three options under the Division 1550 plan, is that assuming the central office reductions above it? Is that assuming that,
No, that is the individual savings from doing just that
okay,
option.
without the freezing of the
Right,
central
the
office?
freezing of
Okay.
central office is got its own price tag up there that you will save. So as you look at this document, if you're sitting there saying, I've got to get to 7.9 million, you can do any combination of this to say, how can I get to 7.9? I could take big ticket items, which there are some on here, or I can take a whole bunch of little ones, try to squeeze them together. We wanted to just give you a full range of things to think about.
Any other questions on the committee? Go ahead.
Your total at the bottom of 11,834,000, so that must assume some choices among these various things.
Yes, that total that is in the yellow burst is the total for each of those sections. So you see where it says school board 34,438? If you add that to the central office, the division 1550 plan, if you took the best savings out of that.
I see, you took the largest savings
Took the
numbers from
largest
each.
savings everywhere to
Okay.
say, if you took the
I see.
largest of all of this. Now, the purpose of breaking it down into smaller buckets is because I want school board to be able to say, well, let's pull this, do this, tweak this, do that. We all, yeah,
save it.
and that is the current deficit, and I have to go on record to say this again. That is the current deficit between what we asked the city for, the anticipated city support based on tonight's meeting, and if we get the governor's budget.
This is just my individual opinion. I voted for it and I'm sticking to 1550 plan. You know, whatever it takes, we gotta try it out, see what we can do to reach that mission, because we cannot throw candy at our faculty and staff each year saying, you'll get 8% last year, you know, then 3% this year. So whatever we promise, we deliver. Now, how we deliver? At home, I cut down on eating out, I cut down on my driving, you know, I cut down other things, but I keep my word on that. So that's my opinion. I think what is off the table just for me is not off the table is 1550. You know, that's the thing we need to stick to, because once we promise, we deliver. Otherwise, we'll have no credibility in our hometown. Hometown means our schools, that these people have been counting on school board to deliver on that.
Anyone else?
And I don't have $7 million to give.
You're not gonna personally cover the.
I'll have borrow from Dr.
Good luck.
Well, with all the, well, yeah, so if we kept the 1550 plan,
Or 1540,
Yeah, I don't know if I have
15.
questions. I mean, I got a few comments. I mean, just doing some of the math, I mean, there's a $7.9 million deficit, right? Obviously, so if level funding last year was $40,000, if in my brain, if we cut school board, we cut central office, we cut community contributions, division, vacancies and programs and services, I'm not prepared to close a school. And I'm prepared to meet Dr. Gupta halfway with the 1550 or 1547. I mean, that would give us a potential savings of $5.5 million, but still we have to ask city council for another $2 million to even reach that point. So it's hard to really try to pull money from somewhere without really affecting kids, right?
right,
And staff. We
when 80% of your budget is
Right.
personnel.
we
and
gotta
benefits.
be competitive when it comes to hiring teachers, and not just teachers, but just support staff, classified staff, nurses, transportation. I mean, everything, right? So I just wish the council. I'm gonna say it, I wish the council would work with us on this, or partner up with us on this, because it's extremely important. It affects a lot of people's lives, right? It's not just, social media outtakes, that sort of stuff. I wish they would really come to the table and meet us halfway on this. So, I mean, it is what it is. But
Dr. Gupta?
you know, $2, if somebody's making $13 right now, and you increase the salary to $15, a 40-hour a week is $80 a week extra. After taxes will be $50 a week, $200 a month. I go to Kroger nowadays, I buy milk and a little bit of yogurt and few fruits, and my bill yesterday was $35. And I looked at my bags one more time. Did I make a mistake? No, I did not. So you got to put yourself in the shoes of those people who are taking care of our kids. And we're making them stop. And I'm not doing it for, you use Dr. Coleman, hyperbole is the word you use?
Hyperbole, that's right.
Yes. I'm not doing it for drama, but you put yourself in shoes of those people. with the current inflation, those salaries are very low. We need to do something before they get tired and burned out by doing 3 and 4 jobs to take care of our most precious asset is our kids. I'm sorry, but that's why there's no compromise on that hourly wage. We got to work it out a way to make sure that we take care of them.
Well, that $15 stays no matter what we do. So where the,
I'm sorry, in the bottom plan, it probably wouldn't.
oh, okay. Oh, that's right, abandoned, sorry. Yeah.
See, the bottom one, 5% will be 65 cents, 5% of $13. And I don't know how other people feel. To me, it's just, on a humanly level, is inhumane. I attended city manager's community conversation, and he was asking for $21 an hour minimum for many city departments.
Right.
And I asked at that time, I said, why are LCS drivers and custodians are any different? Right? They live in the same town, they buy food from the same Kroger or Food Line, right? The price is same. The pressure felt by one individual is felt by everybody in this community, right? Unless they go to Mars to buy their foods and gas and everything else. So, you know what I'm saying?
I agree with you. I think it's a moral imperative to provide a living wage, and $15 an hour is barely a minimum wage for a single-person household. Many of these people are heads of household, so they're supporting more than themselves.
The budget could be a nonsense budget which doesn't make sense, or it could be a common sense budget. And to me, it makes common sense to have a threshold. And Dr. Carter, you suggested that $15 an hour 2 years ago. And I was one of those who were against it, but now looking back, I should have voted for it because the inflationary pressures were unpredictable and they are way above $15 right now.
Right.
Does the 47 grand a year keep us competitive in our area?
Dr. Woodica has, Landis.
So it depends on what everybody does, but just based on the 5% increase that most people are sort of looking at, that would put us sort of in second place, we'll say, in the region.
Okay.
And then like the 5% plan would leave us at second to last. So that's just kind of where we would be.
Because last human resource report, we had 38 resignations or retirements and 8 nominations. So my question to you, Dr. Wardka, is will be able to reduce that gap, or that gap will keep widening up as we, go into this salary?
Oh, I think if we don't keep up, then the gap is just gonna get bigger. I mean, I don't know, I'm not sure how we would expect anything different.
So basically, when fall rolls in, you may have classroom with no teacher. That situation is very much could become a reality.
Exactly.
Based on the last HR report, the way the gap is, if you don't take care of a monetary incentive for these teachers, they may jump ship like they have done it in the last HR report. So your and my son and daughter may not have a teacher in the classroom, although they're attending school, or maybe combination of multiple classrooms into one.
I think that even if we're not concerned about the welfare of the people that we're talking about, as far as the teachers and what their salaries are, what we also have to recognize is whatever decision we make is going to impact our city, not just the person in the classroom, but it's going to impact our city. It's going to cause people that are educated, dedicated, that want to come to Lynchburg, it's going to cause them to go someplace else rather than to come here. That's going to hurt our city. And based on the meeting that we had with, that City Council had a few weeks ago, it seems that the great majority of people in our city, whether we're talking about teachers or students or just people in the community, are advocates of doing something to help increase the budget so that we can retain these people. We've got to think about all of us, not just a few people. We've got to think about what's good for the city.
Just doing some quick arithmetic here. If I add up the the savings amount that are indicated on here for all except the Division 1550 plan and the school closure, it comes to 2.5 million. And the kind of target we're looking at in the red box at the upper right is 7.9 million.
Correct.
So if we really have to meet that 7.9, I do not think it's possible without touching the 1550 plan, as painful as it may be for us to recognize
Yeah,
that.
that is the reality. That is the reality.
Did you count this, cut 15 positions at $1.1 million?
Where? I can't use that number right there.
Okay.
The 1,146,172.
That's the total of both.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I didn't count this and I didn't count that, but I counted everything else.
So 3 million is a
And it
saving,
came
right?
to
And if you
that
go
number.
1547. So that takes it down to
Oh, we
4.9
got a different number.
million,
So which
right?
ones did you count?
And then we take these positions out and this one, so that takes it down to about for 2.5 million. So 2.5 more mil. So it's about $2.5 million deficit right now. So if we, I think we got to mull through these numbers. Could be, we'll be able to reach some destination, but we got to be firm in our willpower. School Board Member Andrews is looking at 1547. You're okay with that?
That's another 3,000, or 3 million.
Million.
No, 3 million savings from that 7
Right,
million.
I'm talking about the savings amounts,
Yeah.
right. Are you still getting a different number than me?
I got $5.5 million.
Then well, our calculations do
And
not
it-
agree, do they?
Yeah.
It's a gap 2.5.
Yeah.
So can I make make sure we have a finer point on, so this deficit is based on assuming the governor's budget ends up getting passed by the General Assembly, which has not happened.
Right.
And the number we talk about with at city council is, they're going to vote tonight on adopting a budget based on the governor's budget, which was not adopted by the General Assembly. So maybe it will be, and maybe something else will be, we don't know.
June.
But we won't know that till June, and so it could be worse than what we see.
Have you looked at other savings? Like, we talked about, when we were looking at health insurance, $384,000 we contribute for all these ancillary units, health insurance, where other school districts should be doing their fair share. And if they do, there could be about almost $300,000 savings for us. What I'm saying is maybe thinking out of the box, going into looking at every place else where we can save money as a district. The things we have been doing, which has been a norm, but it will not be a norm from, you know what I'm saying? We gotta take care of our own household before we start supplying food to the neighbors. I mean, neighbors are great neighbors, but that was $384,000 of expense we were incurring year after year. The point I'm making is these little buckets could add up to that $2.5 million we need to fill up that gap. Just a suggestion, just
No, I wrote it.
No.
anything and everything is
That's
up
a
on the
good one to
table.
Put back on the table.
Okay, last thing is instruction. We cannot cut gov school seats, we cannot cut, you see what I'm saying, teachers. So those are off the table, but there are other ancillary stuff where we can cut and save. Let local counties contribute their fair share. And we,
Question is, could we negotiate that change in time to deal with this? How long would it take to write
And are their
letters, for
budgets
them to have
Are
meetings?
settled. Yeah.
Or can we just do that unilaterally and say,
in tough final situations, even a tenured professor is fired because the university is having financial troubles. You don't have.
Well, when I was a faculty member, I was told that that was not one of the reasons they could fire someone. They could make life very difficult.
Well, I think we can ask
Yeah.
our administration to explore the possibility of doing it, whether we have memorandums of understanding that would
Have to be
limit our
modified,
ability
yeah.
to do that, whether it's too late in the process to do that. But certainly that is something we want to do, and I would really like to see it implemented actually for FY '25, because we've talked about this several years and haven't come through with it. And in the whole scheme of things, the 300,000, when you're talking 7.9 million, isn't a lot, but it's still significant.
And, you know, doing the school closure conversation now, in my mind, is because since we have a consultant, there's a process flowing,
Correct.
but we know it's coming. And there could be potential savings coming from that aspect, and how soon could we implement those? But those are secondary discussion later on.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, it's, looking at these numbers, it'll be tough, it'll be difficult, it'll be painful, but we will be able to do the right thing.
I just want to say I really appreciate the hard work and quick turnaround time of Dr. Edwards and her staff to go through this and try to find not just where the money can come from, but the most equitable way, and least damaging, but people are going to be hurt. This is an impact on all of us, and it's not what we wanted to do. And we had really, maybe it's oversized wishful thinking that city council would come along and understand the issue of salaries and benefits and the size that plays in our budget. But they're dug in, and so we have to respond accordingly. So we could review these, mix and match, see where we land. And then full board can vote on that.
This is a
Dr.
first
Gupta?
reading. I just wanted to make a secondary comment. You know, Dr. Edwards, admire you for what you're doing. But for anybody who's watching this meeting, if somebody's standing on a street and you slap their face and they don't slap you right back, don't take it as a sign of weakness. And in Gandhi's word, that's a sign of wisdom they have. They're nonviolent, and they're not going to respond foolishness with foolishness. So I admire you, what you do, what you're doing for our kids. And in my mind, we're lucky to have you in Lynchburg City Schools. So.
I can second that. I agree.
Absolutely.
And again, I really admire the hard work of your staff. I'm sorry we didn't have a lot of these in advance for you to review, but this is a lot of work that they've done. They're trying to hit a moving target, an uncertain target, and we still don't know where we're gonna be. So are there any more questions about what Dr. Edwards has just presented?
Discussing in a full board will be appropriate, so everybody is involved.
I'm sorry?
And discussion in a full board meeting
Oh, yes, definitely.
will give time for people to digest it. Would you be able to put this on board docs?
I will.
Yes.
Get copies for Tina to
Right.
scan.
Okay, so we are reaching part 2 of our meeting. And this is where we are going to entertain or address some of the questions or assertions that have been made during this budget process that we want to clarify. So if it's okay with Dr. Edwards, I'm going to go through these items one by one, and she or her, who she designates, can provide us with clear answers to these questions. Is that all right? Sure. Okay. So, last year, LCS published pay schedules for each position, and those pay schedules included at least a 5% increase for staff. Did LCS use those pay schedules that were published last year?
So the answer to that is yes. And similarly, this year, when we put together 1550, we continued the pay scale work that we had done in the previous year by working on the admin tables and the remaining tables that we had not done in the first year.
Thank you. A city council member alleged that teacher salaries went down by 8% from last year to this year. Did teachers or staff receive 8% less pay this year when compared with what they made last year?
So first, let me just say, I would hope that if anyone got their first paycheck and it was 8% less, that I would not be finding out about it right now, that they would have not had a problem to contact HR, myself, the finance department. But that being said, we did go back and kind of look at every staff member in like positions. So for example, if you were a 10-month teacher last year and 10-month teacher this year, just to make sure. For the record, no one reported to myself that, hey, my salary went down by any percentage or anything like that. And our scan of just looking at our data pretty much matches what we put on those pay tables from last year, that, you know, teachers received either 5%, and in some cases, because they're on an every other year, they received more, and classified staff as well. The differences that we may see is if a staff member started at the end of last year, let's say I started in April, so I have 2 months worth of salary, and then now I've been here for a full year, I might look like I got a 400% increase, but I was only here for a short period of time. Or the reverse, if I were here all last year and then I left, let's say I retired in December, we had a couple staff members retire in December, then my salary would not look, it would look like it decreased. So we looked at those one by one just to make sure that we did not have any anomalies there. We do have some staff members that changed positions, so we may have a teacher that moved into a leadership position that is slightly different, or into a supervisor position. We've had that. So while the staff member is still here, their role changed as well. And then probably one of the most important things that we need to understand, and I've talked about this a little bit with the even before the pandemic, we were expecting baby boomers to retire, our baby boomers to retire. And we did see across not only in Lynchburg City schools, but across the Commonwealth and in multiple places across our nation where 21-22, many people left the profession. So if we took this room right here and said that we were all veteran staff, and some of you have relocated and some of you have retired, and we replace you with the same number of staff, but with 1, 2, or 3 years experience. If you look at the average salary of all of us versus the average salary of our replacements, it would go down even though the number of physical bodies is the same. We have typically, when we budget for what we call midpoint when we're trying to budget a salary. So even if it's a veteran staff member, and we are very fortunate, like our staff have been sticking around. We had somebody who, after 40 years, retired. We did not get a 40-year veteran to replace that person, so you would see some differences in salaries that way as well.
All right. Can you explain what happens to the actual payroll budget when veteran staff, and this is a nice segue from what you just mentioned, when veteran staff retire or leave and are replaced by novice or just new to the profession staff?
Yeah. So if you look at our pay tables, there's a difference between our folks who are in their 20, 30, 40 year plus, which 40 years actually, we call it over the top. They aren't even on our pay table for some of those folks. And then our entry level position. So, and you can actually look at our board agendas to see at what level folks are coming in, whether they're coming in at entry level or whether they're coming in at veteran staff. And I will tell you that over the last couple years, we're seeing more and more entry level folks and less veteran staff who are saying, I've been in teaching for 14 years and I'm just gonna come and come to LCS and start a new career. So that is pretty much where we are. The other thing that we're noticing is that less folks are going into education. So the pools of what we're picking from, or the staff that we're picking from, are also decreased. And here's pieces that you may not necessarily see when you're just looking at body for body. As a veteran teacher, we have some excellent teachers. They typically do not need as much support and training because they've been here for a bit. They have a toolbox that is a tool house almost, that they can pull from to help all kinds of kids. We know from research that within the first 5 years of teaching for anybody, those are the hardest years. So how do you support brand new teachers? We have instructional coaches, mentors, and things. So even novice staff need a little bit more support than perhaps veteran. I'm not saying veteran staffs don't need help and support. By all means, they certainly do and deserve the professional development and training. The investment in a novice staff member can tend to be a little bit more people intensive in terms of support. It's hard to put a dollar amount on that when it comes to time and talent and training.
Thank you. There has been talk that the operating budget for instruction has gone down ever since we started receiving CARES and ESSER funds. Those are pandemic-related funds that came from the federal government, some of them from the state. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So after the pandemic in the, when we're looking at starting in May of 2020, I think is when we first started seeing some of the ESSER funds, CARES funds come to us. And originally, we were looking at that. It was, I think the term was PPE, right? We were looking for anything in terms of sanitizer and keeping our schools clean. And the initial funding was used for that. And at some point, as the pandemic continued and ESSER funds and CARES funds continued, there became provisions where we didn't want to lose valuable staff, so part of these funds could be used to keep staff. And if you remember, we in the city and in schools, we were predicting that sales tax would be so far down to the point where our budget was even changed because of it by the former city manager, because of that prediction that we're going to have to help the city out because sales tax is down and they receive sales tax and we receive sales tax and both of us were down. But here we were situated with these CARES funds that we could use for instruction. So at the time, yes, decisions were made to use that money for instructional purposes, in some cases to even pay for staff. And I think originally we started with in CARES, our first set of CARES money, which expired in 2022, but that allowed us to pay for 20 FTEs. 20 FTEs that we could say, all right, let's use CARES instead of operating so that we can help both ourselves and the city as we predict that we would have sales tax for that. But that would make your instructional operating budget look a little lower because those people were now funded or paid for by CARES. And we continue to do that because the CARES money continued to come in, and there was a big push for use this money for instruction, for learning loss, pay for your mentors, your tutors, your summer program, your extra, everything that you need to pour into kids, use this CARES money. Now, we were previously using operating dollars because we had summer programs, before school programs. This helped us make them a little bit bigger, but it also helped offset that. So in an operating budget, in instruction, where you have CARES money, it would be the equivalent of saying, I'm taking this money out of my checking and I'm just going to put it in my savings. And someone only looking at your checking saying, look at that checking going down, 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 down over a year. But they're not looking at, well, what happened in the savings account over here? So we have done that. I have had those conversations, and we do give you all a CARES update report. I think the last one we gave the school board was on March 24th, 2023, with numbers in it. And I'll jump in if you guys want to add anything to that.
Before COVID, did the operating budget for instruction include funds for before and after school programs and summer programs? Over the last 2 years, has LCS been able to use CARES funds to cover those programs and additional
I
services?
think I talked too much.
Yeah,
So yes, I do.
you got a little ahead of yourself.
Yes, I do. So, Amy, you might want to talk a little bit just about some of the things that we do in the summer.
Certainly. Over the past 2 years, we have been able to use CARES funds to add additional summer programs. I believe, we've reported in the past that our summer program numbers, our students participating in our summer programs has, I think in the first year probably tripled, and last year increased even over that. So we have been able to offer additional summer school programs, our Power Scholars program at the elementary level. Last year, we were able to offer that Power Scholars program at the middle school level as well. We offer some SOL academies to help students get past those end-of-course SOLs and move them on their path to graduation. Last year, which was very exciting, and I know this summer we're going to continue to do the same thing, we offered some not just remedial services, but also some enrichment activities and enrichment programs for our students. There was a wonderful theater program during the summer at T.C. Miller. So we have been very fortunate to be able to use CARES funds to cover some of our additional programs. But the answer to the first part of that is yes, prior to having CARES funding, we funded our summer programs through our operating budget.
So eventually, when the CARES funding expires,
What?
that will move back into our operating budget and could equate to a kind of a big bounce in our ask.
It could.
So that's coming.
I think last year, for the past 2 years, and this year, we'll probably spend well over $1 million just on programming, and that doesn't include, food or transportation, those types of things.
Thank you. Once again, will you remind everybody what is covered in terms of positions under the administration budget category?
Yeah, so when you say administration budget category, I'm assuming you're referring to the categorical funding, the administrative line there. And I say that to say, because most of us, when we say administration, we think, oh, a building principal or assistant principal, that's administration. The school nurse might be in administration, or the differences in how the term is used. So if we're specifically talking about the administrative line that is in categorical funding, and I'm going to try to do this, there are approximately 22 school nurses, all right, in the admin line. Now, I know there's school people, but the way that we are required to fund, and Ms. Capazzi could get into this a little bit more with the funding codes and all of that, but I'll do the people. So our 22 school nurses, approximately 16 attendance clerks. We've got at least 3 BCBA positions. We don't always have a BCBA.
And what is a BCBA?
The board certified behavioral analyst, who really does an awesome job at training staff and really helping work with behaviors, and we're seeing definitely the impact of some of our student behaviors. Our school behavior coaches who work with our BCBAs are also in the admin categorical line. Our school psychologists, we've got 6 behavior coaches and 6 psychologists. Our school truancy officers, don't sleep on school. We definitely want to make sure our kids are here. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things that they use to measure whether or not we're accredited, is if our students are actually attending. School registrar, also, we had 7 truancy officers. In addition is what's in this building, which are the people in my office, 6 people in my office. The HR department, there's about 7 folks there. The finance department, 14 folks there. Equity and community relations, our communications department, 7 folks there. And then in the student services department, they're kind of split. There are about 10 positions that are, while they say student services, and that's who they serve, they're considered to be in the admin budget. So as we look at really a focus on, I know there was some talk about reducing the admin budget. We are looking at all of that, but I also wanted the board to know that there are parts of the admin budget that I don't think we want to touch, like
No.
school nurses or BCBAs and things like that.
Thank you. Finally, during last year's budget season, there was discussion about using a funding formula this year. Can you bring us up to date on what's happening with that? And remind us what funding formula refers to.
So, working with the city manager, one of the things that he first shared with me that when he worked in Norfolk, they had a funding formula for Norfolk City Schools, which is a formula that the city used to determine how much money the schools would get based on the city's budget. And this was at the end of while we were in the middle of doing last year's budget, so it wasn't appropriate to do it at that time. But we had discussed the possibility of, for the FY24 budget, using a funding formula and really looking at what that funding formula would look like for Norfolk. So we had talked about that in the spring when we all got back together, school board and school in August, from Greg Patrick, who at that point was the director in Norfolk, but is our assistant city manager right now, to their budget and strategy planning. And so I used that document to kind of see, well, what would that mean for us if we were to use this? And let me tell you, my background is in chemistry and science and not funding formulas, so there was a lot of work that I did to really learn that funding formula. But we were in conversation early on, and Dr. Coleman, you can help me too. We meet with the school board chair, the vice chair, the mayor, the vice mayor, myself, and the city manager. So early on when we were having our meetings, we talked about the possibility of having a funding formula for this year before we got started with our budget in October, November, December. And then I think we were at the point where we were having elections, and there was a request that we not entertain that discussion just yet, and that we wait for the outcome of the November election. So while we internally were like, well, let's see what this would look like if we played with it, we were waiting for, on the city side, to come back and share information with us. Then the elections happen, and of course you elect in November, and then they're not seated until January. So then we were asked to wait until, obviously our newly elected officials were seated in their roles and positions in January, and then city council got on to the business of city council. I think Mr. Patrick, once he became employed here, did a presentation for city and kind of went over what our different types of funding formulas are, but we did not get very far in terms of the commitment to LCS, or at least talking about a funding formula. And Dr. Coleman, if my memory is missing.
Oh, you're quite accurate.
I
Quite
remember
accurate.
that meeting. It was quite thorough, nice PowerPoint presentation and the ramifications of different aspects of that. All righty. I think that's all the questions we had received or knew about based on things that are happening in this chamber with this school board and things that have been mentioned or alleged at council, either meetings or work sessions. So hopefully we've cleared that up. And so we're approaching the end of our meeting time. And so are there any other questions, comments?
I just want to thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the Finance and Facilities Committee and the staff for an excellent meeting and for responding to questions and to helping the public to understand what the full board will be facing if the local funding that we have gets passed tonight or whenever it gets passed. So I want to thank you for your work.
Well, I really, hats off to, again, Dr. Edwards and her staff. So our next steps will be sharing all this information with the full school board. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just had one,
Go ahead.
so my sense, before I leave, is we are in agreement as a committee that some version of 1550, whether it's 1550 to 1547, is what this committee would like to see. Am I correct in assuming that?
my preference would be to go to the 1547.
Can I put a motion for this?
That's our recommendation.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that way at least we know that one thing is for sure, so nobody's out there wondering where are we heading, you know? So I make a motion that we recommend to the full board to consider 1547.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Discussion first?
Oh, okay, yeah, discussion, sorry.
So, like everyone else, I'm in favor of the 1550 plan, but the point I made earlier is, can we reach this target of 7.9 million? Well, if we go to 1547, that doesn't do it. But if we go to 1547 and close an elementary school, that does. So I'm just
Right.
saying, just looking at the arithmetic here, that's what it looks like, you know, with that target. Now, I understand that target is not set in stone yet, but it may well be in 12 hours.
And from everything, the way things are, it's unlikely that it will go up either from the state or from the local.
So I'm just commenting that we need to
Right, yes.
to understand where we stand. Mhm.
See, what I am suggesting is, we have at least one variable which is constant, 1547. Then other permutation combinations, we can look at it as we move forward. And that may include school closure or not school closure, but at least we have firmed up one variable in our equation. And the others can move around that variable to reach that 7 million which you.
I hear you.
Ready for a vote? All
Yes.
those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. All right.
The hands of,
Anything else?
Dr. Coleman now, hands of the chair.
We'll see what happens, but this has been a good meeting.
Well, it's not over yet.
Okay.
So our next steps is we will share this information with the full board along with our recommendation to plant our flag on 1547 plan. And then it's possible that following that work session and we discuss all this, we may need to hold a called meeting on May 23rd or May 30th.
Will they be at Heritage too?
Teacher meeting, though. 16, right.
Yeah, we're gonna be honoring students and all of
Right.
that.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, our next meeting is, I don't have work, on May 16th at Heritage High School. That's our work session where we will pour over these in the meeting for the rest of the board, and I'll email the ones who aren't present today that they can see all these documents on board docs. And again, keep your dates open for May 23rd and/or May 30th for a called meeting, if necessary.
Okay.
All right,
Motion to adjourn.
adjourned.